Syngenta Flowers Conference, like we did last year, where we had a discussion about developments in markets. Welcome, good to have you here. And discussed about several differences in the business, in the Asian markets and the European markets. Today we wanted to do it slightly different. We did not want to touch on how the sales are going. We also didn't want to touch on what the new innovations are, because people should just come over and see that for themselves. What we want to do is to zoom out a little bit further and really think about and contemplate about the theme of this flower trials. It's breeding innovation. And what does that mean? Innovation can be anything. It can be about business, it can be about your customers, it can of course be about products, but then always products in their surrounding, in their habitat. So we have invited 4 industry experts, a very versatile group, and I'm going to introduce them to you now. I would very much like to encourage you all to ask questions. Don't feel that you're interrupting, because we would like to have a live engagement with everybody here. So I'm going to start, let's start over here, with Dr. Ronald Snyder, our breeder, co-lead of the breeding group. Ronald holds a PhD in interspecific breeding. He probably will say something a bit more about that, and he is really an expert in the interaction of what is happening in the world and how you can engage with that as a breeding company. Next to that we have Mr. Maarten Leune. Maarten is the Managing Director of RAI, Royalty Administration International, and he is responsible for collecting royalties on innovation. And we will discuss how the role of innovation can be safeguarded by such a financial system behind it. Because innovation is of course very nice, but it also needs to be protected, because it needs to remain profitable. You need to be able to invest in your company and in your innovations. Then we have Mr. Geert Maas. And I've thought very long and hard about how to describe Geert. Because Geert, yes, I know Geert, he is an extremely versatile person. Not only is he a university teacher, he is also an artist. And he has a lot of knowledge and thoughts about greening public life. So we will interact and engage with him on the role that flowers have. So what can flowers do, for instance, on public health, but also on beautification. And he will touch on the changing dynamics of the use of flowers. And finally, my very good friend, Mr. Mallikarjun Mangrule. We sometimes call him Malik, because not everybody can pronounce his name as easily as I can. Malik is our head of business in Asia Pacific, that we usually refer to as APAC. Malik has quite a long career in our vegetables department of Syngenta Vegetables in the Asian markets. He's born and raised in India, but now lives in Thailand. And we will discuss with him what we as Western European or American people would consider to be normal, if that is also normal in Asian cultures. So we will touch on differences, but also on similarities. And mind you, there will be some engagement for the audience in that. So let's start. Let's see. I think we should start with Mr. Geert Maas. Geert, would you be so kind as to tell the audience how you see the role of flowers in society, and if there has been any change in the past decades?
No, thank you for your invitation, of course, and it's very nice to see what is happening in this case of growers. And what we see in the, let's say, the coming up story about flowers and plants is in one way is a big change. We come from the 70s where everybody could afford to have flowers and plants at home. That was in that way new, so there was a lot of new types coming on, and everybody was using it as a kind of decoration thing. We want to decorate our homes, we want to decorate our gardens, our terraces. And now we are 50 years further on, and the market is, let's say, fulfilled. There's a lot of assortment of plants and flowers. And besides that, let's say the crisis we have in all kind of ways now at the globe, that makes us, I think, on a turning point that the flowers and plants can be seen probably more as a healthy investment for your own life, for your own terrace and house. So I think could be a very interesting focus point to use this as a kind of sales. From, hey, do you recognize that if you have flowers and plants around you, you feel yourself much more happy? So that happiness is, let's say, an essential part of your life nowadays. And that is the difference between the 70s and let's say now the 20s, that the happiness is going together with health. And health is, let's say, we can evolve our health by using more plants and flowers. So that's, I think, very essential to realize that this is coming up.
So, if I can summarize this, you're saying that flowers are more than just fun.
Yeah, exactly. I think we are passing that let's say that item that just decorating as fun. It's essential to have plants around you to get shadows, to keep the temperature lower, to get healthy, to get wellness and a happy feeling. So that everything has to do with flowers and plants. So that's totally different as just decorating.
So then you're also touching the area of public health as well.
Yeah, of course. You will see now, first of all, let's say the architects around the world are developing buildings as forests, as gardens.
Maybe that's a good moment to pause because we have some excellent slides for that. Felicia, would you be so kind as to... yeah, that's an excellent title, From Stone Age to Green Cities.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask for the next slide and feel free to voice it over and ask for the next slide when applicable.
Now, Stone Age is, of course, of all the stone we have created, the concrete buildings and all the roads we have created. That's what I mean with Stone Age. And we see now that this is becoming a problem. It brings too much traffic, it brings too much pollution. So into the green choice is a much better choice than all those concrete. And so the buildings who are now, let's say, designed by the architects around the world are really based on that new future. How can we staple stuff as a new city? We can make towns just on 100 square meter. We can make a forest town. Do we have pictures? Okay, yes. Not on that side. Okay.
Not yet.
Some samples, this is the valley in Amsterdam. The idea behind is that it should be a building, a kind of town, and a park in one building. So all the roofs are now a park, an open park. You can pass on all those roofs. You have a park, but besides that, you have also, let's say, the living. So together, as a new town, a new city, it can, let's say, on a very short square meter, you can build a whole, everything what you want, what you need to have a good life. But essential in the whole idea is the green. Now, of course, we have in Milan the Bosco Tower. We see in Eindhoven they are now developing in the new Trudeau building, and everything has to do with green because you have to reduce, let's say, the heat. So that's why we are use more plants. And it's not only Europe. You see in the Far East developments of the new town Chengdu in China, where they're going to build a new town, new city. And the only idea behind this is how can we get a better life with more green in it. So they start with green instead of thinking about buildings. So that's totally different. First, they had always first the design of the building, and now they start first to design with the green. And the next slide is that's maybe one of the most interesting in the world at this moment. It's the forest city, where the whole city is built in a forest. So the forest is more important than the whole city. And there, if this is going to happen, that means such a big change for our business that people have, let's say, in one way, the knowledge, the attitude from, yeah, but I only have a house, that's not enough. I need green, I need my trees, I need my forest. So, and there is the entrance, I think, for us to keep this alive.
And I would like to pause here for a moment and ask our breeder, Ronald. Ronald, this must sound very positive for you. I know you as an enormous flower enthusiast and seeing all these green cities. What do you think of that?
Well, I would love to see that day that the experience, that the feeling that you convey, and the feeling that I have also that makes me do what I do, is shared and recognized by more people, of course. I understand what you mean, and I would love to make whatever you want, what we need to provide that, to enable that.
So a question for you to follow up on that. You always say that breeders create the flowers that we as marketeers request. Are we, because you touched on patience for a little bit, are we as an industry patient enough for you as breeders?
Well, typically the whole breeding process from idea to finished product probably takes a little bit longer than the marketing plans. Therefore, it is my plan or maybe my strategy to give you the feeling that you gave the idea, and I actually maybe started it. Because it takes about 10, 12 years from an idea to a finished product. And if I ask you, please marketer, tell me what will the world look like in 12 years? You don't know.
Well, Ronald, thank you very much for my excellent ideas.
Yeah, I'm sorry for that. I mean, I should have said a little bit differently maybe, but I understand that.
I understand what you said.
On the other hand, the crops that were big 12 years ago are typically still big now. So it's not that big of a size.
Examples of that?
Well, I mean, crops like pelargonium and pansy and marigold, petunia, vinca, all these zinnia, I mean, these have been around for a long time and are still big now, cyclamen. Therefore, I think it's quite safe to say that within 10 years, these are probably still significant as well.
Maybe that's a good moment to pause and ask for Mallikarjun. We talk a lot about the Eastern markets and the horticultural industries. Can you say something about what you just heard from Ronald being important crops, and what kind of similarities and differences do you see between Eastern and Western cultures?
I think in Asia, which is a largely populated region among all the three regions, we are having roughly 60% of the total population living in Asia, which are densely populated. So the preference for the flowers is totally different compared to Europe, wherein in European people prefer to have gardens, whereas in Asia, as you rightly mentioned, we prefer to have plants, pot plants in our balconies. So that is one. And with the economic development that we are forcing in Asia, the spend on the flower plants is increasing day by day. So this is one. There are other various differences that we have seen in terms of demand, preference of the crop, trade dynamics, the appreciation towards the color, size of the flower. So I would say there are clearly differences over and above. There is religious significance for flowers. To give you an example, one of the largest crop that is there in Asia is marigold, which is being offered to the god in the temple. So it is totally different than the way flowers are being utilized in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that crop marigold, because we have been working pretty hard in that market. Maybe it's interesting for the audience to say something about that crop in particular, because I recently found out that it is not grown by ornamental growers, but by vegetable growers. So relating that to what you're saying, it is as if people consider ornamental flowers as important as food.
Yep. So garland marigold is a fastly developing crop in tropical APAC, primarily India, Vietnam, Thailand, Bangladesh, Nepal. And this crop is widely used for offering the flowers and developing garland for the god or various temple in tropical APAC. And this crop is grown by vegetable growers in the open field, which is not the case in several other parts of the world. So it is primarily grown because of its very good economics, and it exactly fits to the tropical hot and humid market, which is being grown in the rainy season in tropical APAC.
But it's not only with marigold used for garlands, also other products are used for garlands.
Exactly. The other products which are being used are chrysanthemum,
Yeah.
rose. These are also the flowers which are widely used for developing the garland or offering the plants.
And big crops that have been around for decades as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it is still growing. I mean, today, if we assess the Indian market, it is just that 50% of the market is hybridized, which means there is still room to grow another 50%, which is currently OP crop. So eventually it will turn to the hybrid crop. So there is a lot of scope to grow that crop further in tropical APAC.
But is there, let's say, similarity what we see in Europe and Asia? Because I still think that globalization is also a little going on in our business, and we see now everything is possible. So let's say we get both, we are learning from each other. What we see in Europe is, let's say, that the wheat is not wheat anymore, because we have now, I was in Chelsea Flower Show, there was now a wheat garden as a design garden. Now it was, especially at Chelsea, not thinkable that it would be real. But if you are now going to Far East, where, let's say, the wheat is growing what for us is a normal plant, is that the feeling the same, that what is wheat and what are plants?
It's improving, I would say. If you really look at the supply and distribution in flowers, especially in Europe, which includes local production plus import of various flowers from the different countries, say for example Kenya, Colombia, several countries, whereas in APAC countries, it is still a local supplies. But with the platform like this, like Flower Trial, California Trials, we are seeing good opportunities for export from Asian market to several other countries in Europe. So we are seeing that trend is positively changing for flower business.
What for me seems interesting, let's say that we are searching for plants who grow like this, very unnatural. We like, let's say, that they are different. But is that the same as for Far East?
I won't say it is that same. The preference for flower crop in Asia are relatively different. I mean, we generally prefer to have bright, bold color. Big flower size is generally a preference.
Okay.
Maybe that's something for you, Ronald, to build on. You once told me a tulip in a potato field can also be considered a weed. So how do you look at that as a breeder? Because again, the breeders interact with the marketeers, and you build what we suddenly come up with. But how does that work? Because it's not only about the look and feel, right? There are other needs in a variety to become successful.
Oh, there's lots of questions there. Some things come to mind that indeed, what you say, if you want to tell yourself it's not requested, not needed, not wanted, it becomes a weed automatically.
Yeah.
Even if it is the leftover plants of last year's harvest. And in the other way around, all crops have started as with their botanical native somewhere, as a wild plant probably somewhere, or their natives or their grandparents. As a matter of fact, Asia or Southeastern Asia is a big place of genetic diversity where many big crops come from, like magnolia and camellia, to name a few. The wild relatives are from there. And in any way, all crops start as weird. As a matter of fact, interesting traits usually start also from a wild relative. But then again, the wild relative then is not a wheat. By the way, I would be happy to breed wheat for you.
But are you only breeding on the desires of the marketing department of Syngenta, or are you also doing things by yourself and think, well, if I cross this one and that one or combination, I might get a very interesting result?
Yes and yes and yes. So, but that is only possible when things go well. I mean, in the end, somebody needs to buy it and needs to be happy with it and also make money from it because of the extra work.
Yeah.
Then it might be some possibilities to indeed try to see what are the boundaries. Mind you, I do know the idea of having the breeder doing just some stuff in the corner, and but that's I think that is the amateur breeder, and he might be lucky. I agree with you, but that's still again the standard nowadays is so high. Threshold, technical threshold, provenance, legislation.
But especially walking into new directions like inter-Pacific crossings might give you a very interesting development for a new crop. For what like Geert was asking, that gives you the opportunity and Syngenta the opportunity to explore and to show how good you are.
Most crops have some kind of different wild species in the background combined. That's what you mean with inter-specific hybridization. That different species are combined, genetically combined to make something new, and that's what you mean. Yeah, that's true. The more knowledge you have about the combinability of different species to crossing abilities, the more you can do as a breeder, but also the more traits you can combine, because in the end we want to make traits and combine traits to make marigolds that are not just beautiful but also easy to grow. And once they are harvested, they also keep for a long time.
And I think this is an excellent bridge to you, Martin, because we're talking a lot about investment and breeding, and that all has to do with cost. But being a commercial enterprise, we also need to consider the profit. So maybe a good way to start is what can you say about being in the post-COVID era, as we call that now? Can you start by explaining how your work has changed in the past 5 years, first with COVID and then post-COVID?
Royalty Administration International is a licensing agency, and we are working for not only for Syngenta, but for many other breeders as well. But our role is actually for each breeder, individual breeder, the same. Is that we are taking care of the use of the varieties, mainly the vegetative propagated material, by issuing license agreements to the large propagating companies, which are allowed to use the genetics which you have developed. But you won't have a return on your investment, because in our sector, you, the breeders, are investing a lot of money, a lot of high percentage of their turnover in research and development. And that needs to be come back, return on investment. So we are using the variety of Syngenta, issuing license agreements to the propagating companies. They are reporting to us how much they propagated of that material, and we send them the invoice and collect the royalty from them and then pay out to Syngenta, which can be used for the investment again. During the COVID, we were not able to visit as usual that frequently and traveling around like everybody, but we had the advantage that we had people in the local areas where the main production was happening. So these local people were still able to do the visiting of the companies and to control whether reports were correct or not. And on the other hand, we have the situation, you always have an overview of all the reports which you get from one certain area, and you have, let's say, 20 licensees in Italy, and all are about the same level as they were before, but one of them is going much lower. I say, hey, why? Why are you lower? That's a question mark, a red flag. So we focus on him, explain to us why your report was lower. And we get an explanation which is plausible or not, and then you can continue, go into details. So that's the way how we solved it. And we actually managed it correctly.
Thank you very much. Mallikarjun, let's finish, because we still have the slide of the first city in Liushu, China, and before I think we saw the slide of Chengdu in China. Maybe Geert, you can continue with the two slides, and then we come back on the Chelsea show, because I have a picture on that as well.
Okay. Do you have another slide behind? Yeah, this is, let's say, with the idea of China, we see that in Mexico they're going to build the smart city, and the the focus is in one way is exactly the same. The name is a little bit different, but the interesting of the idea behind is that it's a fully self-supporting city has to be, and in that way, is this a sample for, let's say, the world to see what kind of energy do we need in the future. So this is a very interesting thing to follow and to see what is happening there. And if you see then the architects, how they, let's say, circle around their own ideas, everyone, and totally everywhere we see, let's say, that the plant is the leading part. So I can't say it enough that make your connection with those guys. Well, these cities are developed for the next 25 years. So it's time enough to develop a new variety. It's time enough for you. It's time enough for you. So you see that, watch those architects and let's say the land planners, what they're going to do with it. And there is your opportunity.
Maybe Marleen, you can show the next slide. Thank you.
Egypt, where in the middle of, let's say, in the middle of the desert, where they're gonna build up the whole story with plants. What, let's say, 25 years was not, you could not imagine. And now they have, let's say, the technical stuff with no problem to get it solved. So in that way, are those spots where, let's say, normally not used for living areas, will be now in future a town, a city, 200, 300, maybe a million people.
Next one, Marleen.
Well, nearby here in Holland, where the architect has said, okay, balconies will be interesting where we can put on flowers. This one is, let's say, built on balconies. The whole building is built around balconies, and on the balconies are pots, let's say, between 1.5 to 2 meters wide, with trees and everything on it. And this will be realized in the next 2 years. And it is amazing how, let's say, the thoughts of an architect are going, and how we, for us, is it just ordinary thing, a pot with a plant, and how they turn it into a design thing. And we have Seoul, where they have, let's say, rebuilt the concrete roads into a park on 5-10 meters high above the city. We have now a park, and this is, let's say, also the first step to get the city greener, to reduce the temperature and to get people out of, let's say, the daily air. I will say it, I would say pollution, but we're gonna have to have fresh air. So fresh air built by parks, plants. So you see that the healthy element for future, to how to raise people for the future with the nature as a normal thing, that's in one way new.
And then my favorite picture.
In Singapore, they have tried, let's say, okay, we're going to build a new forest, but then also in a technical way. So the trees are, let's say, a technical thing, but as a totally new idea of making a forest in comparing with living and green, is this also a way of thinking. It's not only green, it's also kind of technical thing. With this, it's very futuristic, looking into the future. You could imagine that it would be a movie in the 70s looking like this, and you are entering with a plane and connecting to a tree, and then go into your workplace. Now it's almost reality. So let's say the flying car, it will be the next one, but this is the reality. So if we could cope with our, let's say, our work with these ideas, you have a tremendous chance to break your buildings into a new way. It's amazing what kind of chances you will get in future with plants.
Thank you very much, Geert. Excellent answer. There's a second reason why I like this picture, and that is because this is Garden by the Bay, where we have our annual cultivar show, along with several major breeders, and I sincerely hope to be able to visit that one the coming year, because it really looks amazing.
Amazing, yeah.
So maybe the next slide, one more. No? One more. Yeah, this is the one that Geert referred to.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a short sentence for you, Ronald. An article in a major Dutch newspaper last week. During the famous Chelsea Flower Show, several gardens showed crops that are seen as weeds in most gardens. Fun fact, contrary to garden gnomes, weeds are not prohibited from the famous British Garden Show. This year, there were 19 kinds of herbs in the Garden of Cleeve West, the only contestant who won twice in a row. They make the soil fertile, healthy, and they pollinate our food, says West. Ronald, any further build on what we already discussed in this trend?
Yeah, the weeds becoming desired plants are no weeds anymore, huh? Are they? These are then wild natives that are remembering me of my heritage, maybe of feeling part of nature. I cannot comply more. I cannot feel more with that than is here. Although in the UK there's also a special, I think they're learning ahead of that. There's also a special feeling about working with sophistication with wild natives, remembering of the quintessential famous UK flower meadow, with a very good feeling about green and serenity and peace. And yeah, that's what we need to do to make that. Please tell me, marketing, and I'll breed it for you. In the meanwhile, these are just things that you can buy also yourself anywhere now. Many of these natives are for sale. Just web shops or garden centers even, you can get them.
Thank you. So let's see what comes next on the slide. Yeah, I was hoping that we were going to do that. It's a very small quiz because Malik and I this morning we found some very nice pictures while Googling, and we were searching on search criteria like Eastern Garden, and then we searched on Western Gardens. And I would like to invite the audience to poll if you consider the next slide to be an Eastern or a Western garden. So hands up for an Eastern garden. Hands up for a Western garden. And feel free to join in the back. Yeah. Our audience is too good. Yeah. That's a pity. Yeah, this one is from England. Next slide, please. And we're starting pretty easy. Yeah. So Eastern or Eastern garden. Yes, very good. Thank you very much. All good. Next slide, please. And this one. Is this picture taken in Europe or in Asia? Europe. Hands for Europe. Hands for Asia? Yeah, then it is Asia. 50% of you were right. So please count your own points and we'll see if we can get you some prizes at the end. Next picture. Who considers this to be an Asian, I think it's a balcony. Yeah, a balcony. Asian balcony. European balcony. I'm very sorry, you're all wrong. This one is from Asia. Next picture, please. I think this is the final one. Is this an Asian or an Western balcony? Hands for Asia. Hands for Europe. That was an Asian one. So it's really hard. And